She wore a tiara so heavy she could barely turn her neck. Diamond stars by the dozens. A riviera of diamonds so magnificent that a single photograph spoke volumes about unspoken power. By 1935, all of it, $5 million in jewels, had vanished. Not stolen, not sold at auction, simply gone. The woman who owned them? She walked away from Spain with nothing but the clothes on her back and never looked back. This is Infanta Eulalia of Spain. And this is the story of a woman who discovered that some cages are made of diamonds and that the only way to be free was to leave them behind. On February 12, 1864, in the Royal Palace of Madrid, a child was born who would spend most of her life fighting the very circumstances of her birth. She came into the world as Maria Eulalia Francisca de Assis, though the world would simply call her Eulalia, the youngest child of Queen Isabella II of Spain. From her first breath, Eulalia's life was encircled by contradiction. Her father, King Francisco, was widely rumoured to be incapable of consummating his marriage. Her mother, Queen Isabella, was a woman of appetites and affairs. Whispers suggested that Eulalia and her siblings may not have been fathered by Francisco at all, but by one of Isabella's lovers. This whisper would follow Eulalia her entire life, never acknowledged in public, never truly dispelled. It created a strange kind of freedom, almost. If the crown's paternity was in question, who could truly claim absolute authority over her? The court where Eulalia spent her earliest years was a performance. Her mother kept a glittering court while rumours of infidelity circulated in every salon. Her father played the wounded, dignified consort and would later use his marital grievances as a weapon, blackmailing his wife for money in exchange for his silence about the children's dubious origins. No wonder, then, that young Eulalia looked at the institution of marriage and saw a cage. But she barely remembered this court, because in 1868, when she was only 4 years old, revolution came. Exile and education. On September 28, 1868, the people of Spain rose against Queen Isabella II. Within days, the family was forced to flee. A 4-year-old royal child became an exile in a single moment. The family settled in Paris, in the Palacio de Castilla on Avenue Kléber, a mansion of considerable grandeur, but also considerable constraint. The household of an exiled queen was a strange place, still royal, still formal, still bound by the rigid protocols that defined court life. Yet it was also adrift, cut off from the machinery of actual power. And in that separation from dynastic duty, Eulalia found something unexpected: space to become herself. She was enrolled in the prestigious Colegio del Sagrado Corazón, one of the finest convent schools in Paris. The nuns were, by her own account, very sweet and gentle. She found them insufferable. She wanted brusqueness, challenge, something to push against. Yet the discipline of that convent taught her what no court tutor could have: how to think, how to read with intensity, how to make her own mind her refuge. By adolescence, Eulalia was fluent in 5 languages. She read voraciously. She cultivated an intellectual life in an era when princesses were not expected to have inner worlds, when they were expected, instead, to be ornaments, decorative, silent, obedient. In Paris, she was none of these things. She achieved what she would later describe as a certain independence of mind, although no independence of action was possible to me. This distinction would define her entire life: the mind free, the body still imprisoned. The marriage that broke her. In December 1874, a coup in Spain restored the monarchy. Eulalia's brother Alfonso became King Alfonso XII. The exile was over. The family returned to Spain. For Eulalia, this was not a homecoming. It was a recapture. She had spent 6 years becoming someone. She had developed political opinions, read liberal philosophy, imagined a life beyond the ceremonial. And now, in a single moment, she was a princess again. The intellectual freedom she had cultivated in exile had to be hidden, locked away, disguised beneath the formal smile of a royal woman. By 1885, King Alfonso XII was dying. He was only 27 years old. His heir was not yet born. His young wife, Queen Maria Cristina, was pregnant with the future Alfonso XIII. In the Spanish court's calculation, this was a crisis. An unborn king, a widow queen, a dynasty in free fall, and an unmarried Infanta, Eulalia, whose royal blood could be leveraged for political stability. The answer, the court decided, was marriage, and quickly. The chosen bridegroom was Infante Antonio de Orleans y Bourbon, Duke of Galliera. He was Eulalia's first cousin, the son of her aunt. On paper, it was a perfect match. Two royal lines, intertwined, strengthened. Eulalia's response was unambiguous. She said no. It was an extraordinary act of rebellion. Royal daughters did not refuse royal marriages. Royal daughters understood that their bodies, their names, their futures were not their own. They were instruments of statecraft, nothing more. Yet here was Eulalia, at 21, exercising what she believed was a fundamental human right, the right to refuse. The court held firm. "It was considered a necessity of state that I should marry at once," she would write years later with barely contained fury, "in order to protect the succession." And then the surrender. I did not care. But she did care. She cared desperately. She had refused him because she understood something that the court did not, that she would spend her life with this man, and she already knew that she did not like him. King Alfonso XII died in November 1885. Eulalia contracted diphtheria. The wedding was postponed, then rescheduled for March 6, 1886, a date chosen not for joy, but for convenience. On her wedding day, Eulalia's face in the portraits tells the story. She is a woman in mourning. The chapel is draped in black. Even her wedding dress is devoid of the white silk and lace that might suggest innocence or joy. Everything about the ceremony suggests what everyone in that chapel understood. This is not a love match. This is a sacrifice. The jewels as power. Even in mourning, even in resignation, Eulalia received a treasure. Her sister-in-law, Queen Maria Cristina, gave her a diamond and pearl tiara, a remarkable piece made by the Spanish jeweler Del Mazzo, containing 1,422 diamonds of various sizes, 68 pearls, and 7 large pear-shaped pearls. The weight of it must have been extraordinary, anchoring her to the reality of her new role. She also received a matching pearl and diamond necklace from her new parents-in-law, who were also her aunt and uncle. The redundancy of royal kinship meant that every direction she looked, she saw family. There was no escape into strangeness, no possibility of discovering someone new. She was trapped in a labyrinth of her own blood. 2 children came quickly, Alfonso in 1886, Luis Fernando in 1888. Eulalia performed her duty. She produced the heirs that dynastic logic demanded, and then she stopped. What happened behind the closed doors of their marriage was not revealed in detail until she published her memoirs decades later. But contemporaries understood. The Infanta and the Infante were profoundly unhappy. Eulalia treated her husband, according to reports from the Spanish court, with vicious disdain. She made no secret of her contempt for him. Meanwhile, he squandered money, took mistresses, and lived the life of a man unburdened by the intellectual or emotional demands of marriage. She endured this for 7 years. Then, in 1893, she made a decision that would change everything. She would travel to America. The United States was holding the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, the legendary World's Fair. Spain, as a major colonial power, was invited to send a representative. Given that King Alfonso XIII was still a child, the honor fell to his aunt, Infanta Eulalia. She accepted. The controversy, when it came, was ostensibly about fashion. Eulalia appeared at the White House wearing a sleeveless gown. This was, in the 1890s, an extraordinary breach of propriety. Women of her rank covered their arms, their shoulders, their flesh, yet Eulalia wore it with complete confidence. And over this gown, she wore the magnificent jewels of the Spanish royal family, diamonds and pearls that represented centuries of dynastic wealth, political power, and cultural legacy. The jewels, in her calculation, transformed the daring gown into a statement rather than a scandal. She was not a woman bearing her flesh for the male gaze. She was a royal woman displaying the symbols of her authority, her status, her unassailable position. Washington society was thrown into chaos. The gossip lasted for weeks. Yet there was something else happening too. Something that made the older guardians of propriety deeply uncomfortable. People were listening to her. She was engaging in intellectual conversation with politicians and diplomats. She was presenting herself directly to President Cleveland, rather than following the prescribed protocols. She was behaving, in short, like a person with agency. By the time she left America, Eulalia had made a crucial discovery: that there were ways to live as a woman that the Spanish court had not taught her, that there were alternative models for female existence, that a woman of intelligence and birth could, if she dared, chart her own course. Choosing herself. In the years following her American journey, Eulalia spent increasing time away from her husband. She traveled frequently. She moved between Madrid, Seville, and Paris, never settling fully in any place. By 1901, she had obtained a legal separation from Antonio. She was not divorced. The Catholic Church would not grant her that dignity, but she was separated, legally, officially, publicly. For a woman of her rank and era, this was extraordinary. Royal women did not simply leave their marriages. They endured them, bore children, maintained the facade, and retired into quiet resignation in age. Eulalia did something different. She left, publicly, and she refused to come back. Her husband descended into decline. He squandered his money. He took a succession of mistresses. He wandered through life without purpose or direction. Eulalia, meanwhile, relished her independence, as one contemporary observer noted, despite often being impoverished. This is a crucial distinction. Eulalia was not wealthy. Her personal income was limited. The allowance that the Spanish crown provided was modest. Yet she was free in a way that most women of her class could never be. She had chosen solitude and financial uncertainty over marriage and security. She had chosen herself. To understand Eulalia's relationship with her jewels, we must first understand what jewels meant for royal women. For centuries, royal jewels were not merely beautiful objects. They were liquid wealth. They were collateral. They were, in many cases, the only property that a woman of noble birth could claim as her own. When Queen Isabella II died in April 1904, Eulalia was 40 years old. The will and testament had been drawn up with meticulous care. Isabella's jewels, what remained of them after decades of sales during exile, were divided among her surviving children and grandchildren. Eulalia inherited the Malario Diamond Star Parure, a magnificent set commissioned from the famous Parisian jeweler. She inherited pearl necklaces of exceptional quality. Potentially, she inherited the pearl and diamond loop tiara, a remarkable piece featuring 32 interlocking diamond ovals with upright pear-shaped natural pearls. These were not trifles. These were significant pieces of jewelry that represented centuries of royal accumulation, dynastic wealth, and the concentrated riches of an empire. But here is the crucial point. They were her personal property, not state regalia. When Eulalia left Spain in 1931, she did not take her most valuable jewels with her. Instead, she left them deposited for safekeeping in the vaults of the royal palace in Madrid. However, in 1935, when she petitioned the authorities of the Second Republic for the return of her property, it was discovered that her jewel box had mysteriously vanished from the palace. The woman who wrote back. The most radical act of Eulalia's life may not have been her separation from her husband or her defiance of court expectations. It may have been something quieter, more sustained, more dangerous. She became a writer. In 1912, under the pseudonym Comtesse d'Avila, Eulalia published a book titled The Thread of Life. It was an essay collection addressing politics, philosophy, and the condition of women. She advocated for universal education. She championed workers' rights. She argued with remarkable clarity for her era for the complete independence of women in all aspects of life. And she wrote extensively about divorce. To understand why this mattered, we must understand the context. Divorce in Catholic Spain was not simply illegal, it was theologically condemned. A marriage was, in the eyes of the Church, indissoluble. Yet Eulalia made her case with passionate clarity. Marriage, which is viewed in our society as a necessary form of union, is a convention governed by laws. Marriage is fundamentally a contract, one that should be dissolved when it no longer serves the interests of those involved. She went further. She argued that the refusal to permit divorce caused greater moral harm than divorce itself. She described the torment of couples trapped in unhappy unions, suffering agonies worse than death, prevented from finding new happiness. She was writing from personal experience, of course. Her own marriage was a catastrophe. The refusal to grant her a divorce had condemned her to perpetual legal dependence on a man she despised. When King Alfonso XIII learned of the manuscript, he was enraged. He sent a telegraph demanding that she suspend publication until he could review the text. The threat was implicit but clear. If she published this book, he would revoke her financial support and possibly her titles. Eulalia was already impoverished. Her income from the crown was modest. The threat of losing even this pittance was genuine. Yet she published the book anyway. Why? Because she had already distanced herself from court life and therefore was not vulnerable to the king's threats. She had, over decades, willingly reduced her dependence on royal favor. She lived modestly. She cultivated friendships outside the court structure. She had made herself, through careful deliberation, into someone for whom the threat of royal displeasure was no longer the ultimate weapon. The price of independence. What happened to Eulalia after 1931 is, in many ways, the most heartbreaking part of her story. When the Spanish Republic was proclaimed and the royal family went into exile, Eulalia's annual income from the crown simply ceased. She was in her mid-60s, a woman of considerable accomplishment and intelligence, yet entirely dependent on the whim of a government that no longer recognized her status or felt any obligation to support her. She moved to Paris, settling into what was described as modest quarters. For a woman who had once worn diamond tiaras at state functions, who had lived, despite her many struggles, always with the security that her position provided, this was a humiliation. Yet it was also, perhaps, a strange vindication. She had spent her life arguing for the complete independence of women. Now, in old age, she was being forced to live that independence, not by choice, but by circumstance. She supported herself through her writing and through the sale of her possessions. In 1909, before the full financial crisis came, she had already begun selling her collection. She sold off her collection of jewels and other luxurious possessions. Even her wedding ring was not spared. In 1932, a New York Times headline announced, "Princess finds clue to $1 million in gems. Infanta Eulalia of Spain says jewel box appears to have been located in Madrid." The jewel box had been located, but was it recovered? The historical record is silent on this point. The jewels, if found, were never returned. The magnificent tiara that had been too heavy for her to turn her head in, the diamond stars that had once blazed across her bodice, the pearl necklaces of exceptional quality, all of these vanished into the chaos of Spanish history. When she died in 1958, at the age of 94, Eulalia left behind no jewelry collection, no portfolio of precious objects. The material evidence of her wealth, her status, her ability to survive independently, it had all been stolen, lost, or scattered in the upheavals of the 20th century. But here is what was not lost: the fact of her ownership. The documents that proved these jewels were hers. The memory of her wearing them, the photographs that captured her in these pieces, the historical record of the value placed upon them. Even though the physical jewels disappeared, the knowledge of them remained. Infanta Eulalia died on March 8, 1958, at her home in Irún, Spain, in the Basque Country, far from the center of power, far from the royal palaces where she had spent her youth. She was buried in the pantheon of the princes in El Escorial, where generations of Spanish royals had been laid to rest. She had lived 94 years. She had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. She had seen the Spanish monarchy deposed, restored, and deposed again. She had watched the world transform from the rigid hierarchies of the 19th century court to the fractured modernity of the 20th century. And throughout all of this, she had refused to be silent. Her jewels are gone. The $5 million collection that might have secured her comfortable old age vanished into the chaos of history. But she remained. She lived to 94. She wrote her own story. She refused to be erased. And in the end, perhaps that is the only immortality that matters. Not the preservation of jewels, but the preservation of the will that wore them. Not the survival of objects, but the survival of resistance. Not the permanence of diamonds, but the permanence of defiance. What do you think? Would you have chosen the jewels or the freedom? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more untold stories of remarkable royal women waiting to be discovered.